How can $1 billion worth of gold be stolen? That's the central question of this story. The story begins with a man who looks, from the outside, like a wealthy millionaire, but in reality he's a master thief. Whatever catches his eye eventually ends up in his hands. His life was all luxury and comfort, expensive hotels, lavish parties, and stealing without fear. He believed it would always stay this way. But carelessness catches up with everyone eventually. Old thefts came back to haunt him, and some enemies started hunting him down, including one man whose hat he had once stolen, who was now out for revenge. Things spiraled until his survival looked genuinely uncertain. Just then, a mysterious group steps in and pulls him out of danger. But this wasn't a favor. The group had its own agenda. Their target was $1 billion in gold hidden inside a prison, and to get it, they needed people who could pull off the impossible. This is where the story shifts. Enter Ringo. He's no ordinary thief, a master of disguise for whom picking locks is child's play, and no bank's safe deposit box can hold him out. But unlike other thieves, Ringo isn't greedy. He only robs criminals and returns the stolen money to their victims. His signature move is that he never runs after a heist. He simply strolls out the bank's front door so calmly that by the time anyone realizes what happened, security footage only shows a figure casually walking away. With this philosophy, Ringo built a small crew called the Misfits. It included Vic, an explosives expert who once single-handedly blew up an entire illegal weapons factory, and a pilot who looked calm and elegant but could take down an entire gang of criminals alone if needed. Despite having such a strong team, Ringo knew their next job would be the biggest yet. Their target, a billionaire named Schulz, who posed as a legitimate investor but secretly made his fortune working with terrorists. He owned several private prisons, and inside one of them was over $1 billion in hidden gold. Reaching it wouldn't be easy. They needed one more man, a thief who specialized in breaking out of prisons. That's how they zeroed in on Richard, who was, at that moment, locked up in a Los Angeles jail. This marks the true beginning of the heist's preparation. Richard was no ordinary criminal. He was a legend in the world of theft, and even behind bars, his mind stayed razor sharp. The Misfits knew that if anyone alive understood how to break out of prison and sneak back in undetected, it was Richard. Meanwhile, things were stirring at the Los Angeles jail. Federal agents received orders to transfer Richard to a private prison, one that, unsurprisingly, belonged to Schulz. The moment Schulz heard the news, he personally showed up to oversee the transfer. But it wasn't duty driving him, it was personal. Richard had once stolen his prized, custom-rimmed hat, and Schulz wanted him inside his prison so he could settle the score himself. Richard slowly sensed the danger closing in. Schulz had captured one of Richard's old friends and interrogated him, but the friend stayed fiercely loyal and gave up nothing, no matter the pressure. Furious, Schulz broke prison protocol, cut the security camera feeds, and had the man tortured, eventually extracting Richard's location. Unaware he was being watched, Richard, once out of his cell, set his sights on a new mark, a billionaire wearing a pure gold and platinum diamond watch. Richard tried making conversation, but the man ignored him. So Richard staged a spill, accidentally splashing a drink on him, and while pretending to help clean up, lifted the watch in seconds. He thought it was another easy score until the guards grabbed him. Turns out, the man he'd robbed was none other than the famous Prince El Holly. Richard paid dearly for the mistake. The guards beat him badly, but he'd planned ahead. Before the beating, he'd quietly stashed a room key card somewhere else. The moment he got a chance, he slipped into the prince's room and made off with a watch worth nearly $1 million. Just as he was about to leave, the prince walked back in. Guards searched the entire room but never realized Richard was hiding just one wall away. When the coast cleared, Richard ducked into an elevator, thinking he was finally safe. But fate had other plans. As he got into a waiting car, the prince appeared again. Except this wasn't the real prince. It was a Misfits team member in disguise, the crew's best driver. Richard realized he'd been set up. The team drove him straight to their hideout, where Ringo was waiting. Seeing the whole crew in front of him, Richard understood he'd walked straight into a den of thieves. Ringo laid it out plainly. Their real target was the $1 billion in gold hidden in Schulz's private prison, and they needed Richard to pull it off. Richard refused at first, but his fear of falling into Schulz's hands outweighed his hesitation. After some thought, he agreed to join the team, and the story takes another dangerous turn. As Richard prepared to go along with the Misfits, he was clear in his own mind. He was only in it for himself. Steal the gold, then vanish. But Ringo's plan wasn't that simple. On the way, Ringo walked Richard through it in full. Stealing gold from Schulz's private prison was nowhere near as easy as it sounded. The security was layered: guards, cameras, alarms, and a system tracking every small movement. Without inside help, the job was impossible. Richard felt a thrill hearing the plan, but also real fear. This wasn't just a heist, it was a mission that could cost him his life. Meanwhile, Schulz had realized Richard had slipped out of his reach. Furious, he had his people searching everywhere. The Misfits pressed on without stopping and arrived in Abu Dhabi. Richard was still torn. Wanting to escape the whole mess, he split from the group the moment they left the airport and threw himself into a night out. Dazzled by Abu Dhabi's glamour, luxury cars, lavish parties, he lost himself in it, convinced luck was on his side again. At one extravagant party, he spotted a billionaire wearing a branded watch. Out of habit, Richard ran his usual play, and within seconds the watch was his. But this time, things played out differently. Just as he turned to leave, a mysterious woman appeared. She didn't just return the watch to its owner, she also pressed a packet of children's toys into Richard's hands. It happened so fast that Richard was stunned. When he finally looked closely, the ground seemed to fall away beneath him. The woman was his daughter, Hope. He hadn't seen her in years, not since the divorce. Seeing her suddenly broke something open in him. Hope's presence changed Richard from the inside. He realized he'd spent his life thinking only of himself, leaving his daughter behind. Hope told him she knew everything about him, including the Misfits' entire plan. That was the moment Richard reached back out to Ringo, this time not out of greed but for his daughter. He decided to join the gold heist for real. But he set one condition: after the job, the full share would be his. Ringo made it clear, the Misfits never keep stolen money. All of it goes to charity. Hearing that, Richard almost backed out again. For him, theft had always been about profit. But Hope, for the first time, asked her father for something. She told him this cause was worth it, and that this was his chance to make up for his mistakes. It wasn't an easy call for Richard, but seeing the hope in his daughter's eyes, he melted. For the first time in his life, he said yes to something with no personal payoff, and that's where the real mission began. Before anything else, the team needed to pinpoint exactly where the gold was hidden. Schulze's private prison looked ordinary from the outside but was every bit as dangerous within. Guards, cameras, and a strict routine covered every corner. One small slip could bring the whole team down. While the rest of the crew worked the plan, Richard and Hope found time alone together. Hope finally opened up, telling him how deeply his sudden disappearance had hurt her as a child. Richard had never realized how much pain his choices had caused her. He promised her he'd never vanish without a word again, no matter what happened. It wasn't an easy promise to make, but it meant everything to Hope. Soon after, the team got confirmation. The terrorists planned to move the gold out of the prison within 3 days. That left the Misfits with almost no time. If they didn't act immediately, the entire plan would fall apart. They decided to create total chaos inside the prison, enough to overwhelm security and keep anyone from noticing what the real target actually was. Ringo made the first move. Disguised as a sanitation inspector, he complained to the prison director about the filthy kitchen and a dangerously old oven that could explode at any moment and damage the prison's reputation. The image-conscious director, hoping for a promotion, immediately ordered a replacement oven, exactly as planned. Vic hacked the delivery network and scheduled it for the next afternoon. The director thought everything was under control, with no idea the real operation was only just beginning. On delivery day, the logistics driver was busy drinking on the job. Violet showed up, locked him in a storage locker, and a Misfits team member took his place driving the truck straight into the prison. Then it was Richard and Vic's turn. Both disguised as maintenance workers, they slipped inside. Once in, Richard accidentally kicked over a nearby sculpture, not out of frustration, but because it was part of the plan. Hidden beneath it was the path forward. Everything was going smoothly until the prison director unexpectedly showed up for an inspection. Ringo tried to stop him but had no choice but to go along. Hearing the director's voice, the team scrambled to hide inside machinery. Then the director hit the start button to test the new oven, and for a few tense seconds, everyone held their breath. Ringo quickly stepped in, claiming the machine wasn't fully installed yet and would throw an error if run. The director bought it and left. Crisis averted, but the real work was still ahead. Once the director was gone, the team breathed easier, unaware how little time was actually left. Ringo used the moment to hug the director and quietly lift his access card, the one key that could open every restricted area in the prison. Waiting for the shift change, Richard and Vic moved fast toward the laundry room, which led down to the underground vault. When they reached the vault, the scale of Schulze's security became clear: heavy doors, sensors, and constantly active alarms. Now came the next phase: create chaos throughout the prison so nobody would think to look toward the vault. Disguised as food servers, the team spiked the inmates' meals with a powerful laxative. None of the prisoners suspected a thing and ate normally. Soon after, the prison descended into pandemonium. Inmate after inmate fell ill, with vomiting, diarrhea, and panic everywhere. Doctors, guards, and stretchers rushed through the halls. The director himself ran in, only to nearly faint from the smell and chaos. The entire prison had turned to disorder. This was exactly the moment the Misfits had been waiting for. Vic and the others, disguised as cleaning staff, made their way to the restroom area, putting up warning signs to keep everyone else away. Hope and the prince posed as investigators and entered the prison, planting a timed bomb under a car's chassis as a backup distraction if things went sideways. Inside the vault, work began. Vic drilled a small hole in the right spot on the floor, and as the timer hit 3 seconds, he dropped the bomb through. The explosion was loud, but it was swallowed up in the surrounding chaos. No one noticed. The vault was open. Vic wheeled in a trolley and started loading gold blocks while Richard worked fast alongside him. But then Vic spotted a surveillance camera watching them. Instead of panicking, he simply took a photo of himself and a gold block facing the camera, then hacked the system and looped that static image on the surveillance feed. The instant Scholes got word, he demanded to see the vault's live feed. The screen showed the gold sitting untouched, so at first he wasn't suspicious. But Scholes couldn't stay calm for long. Driven by doubt, he checked the screen again, and this time noticed the image wasn't moving. Panicked, he rushed to the vault himself, but by then it was too late. The Misfits had already cleared it out. Enraged, Scholes locked down the entire prison. No one was allowed to leave. Around that time, a patient was wheeled out on a stretcher. Scholes's eyes landed on it, unaware the patient was actually Vic in disguise. Just then, a small gold block slipped off the stretcher and fell. Scholes realized something was very wrong and ordered every ambulance stopped, convinced Richard and his team hadn't yet made it out of the prison. The search was still underway when Scholes got more news. His men claimed they'd captured Richard's daughter. A smile spread across his face. He was sure he now had Richard exactly where he wanted him. But right then, two people nearby caught his attention, dressed in protective suits, claiming to be staff from a toxic gas cleanup company, warning of a gas leak inside the prison and insisting the area be evacuated immediately. Confused but with the situation already spiraling, Scholes didn't know what to make of it. Just then, a car sped past him, and Scholes spotted gold inside it, instantly convinced this was the real escape plan. Without wasting a second, he ordered his men to give chase. What he didn't realize was that the chase itself was a distraction. The driver was the Prince, actually a Misfits team member, deliberately leading them in the opposite direction, straight into a high-speed chase across the desert. Scholes believed he was closing in on victory. When the car finally stopped, he rushed forward and threw open the trunk himself, only to find it completely empty. In that instant, he realized he'd been fooled yet again. Meanwhile, the real team was still inside the prison. Richard and the others used the sculpture as a casting mold, melting the gold in the oven and pouring the molten metal into it. Within moments, a large gold statue was ready. The team then painted over it to make it look like a damaged object, and openly presented it to the director under the pretense of needing repairs. The director suspected nothing, completed the paperwork, and let the team walk right out of the prison with it. Back outside, Scholes was seething, ready to pull his gun, when guards suddenly surrounded him. Before he could understand what was happening, the truth came out. The Prince wasn't fake at all. He was the real Prince Al-Hali, who had quietly positioned his guards well before the action even started. The moment Scholes reached for his weapon, the guards overpowered him instantly. Cornered completely, Scholes still believed he had one last card to play. He ordered his men to deal with Richard's daughter. But the next moment, it was Violet standing before him, the woman he'd mistaken for Hope all along. She had let herself be captured deliberately. Even as a prisoner, the pilot took down every one of Scholes's men within moments. With no options left, Scholes faced only Richard and his team. His last attempt at resistance was crushed instantly by the Prince's guards. In the mission's final stretch, the Misfits quietly funneled the stolen gold to charity, keeping not a single dollar for themselves. The chaos across Abu Dhabi's streets settled, but through their disguises and clever misdirection, the team kept the authorities completely in the dark. No one ever realized the gold had been stolen. Richard thanked Ringo and the rest of the team, promising he'd never act selfishly again. And that's how the $1 billion gold heist was pulled off, without a single death and without a sound. If you enjoyed it, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next heist happens without you otherwise, and trust me, you don't want to miss it.